Cherilyn Mackrory, Conservative MP since 2019. Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
We're going to talk about a very tough experience that you went through in this interview. I'd like to take you back to the 3rd of January 2019 when you and your husband were at the routine 20-week scan for your second baby.
So I was pregnant with second baby, already had a beautiful 4-year-old girl, and no problems with the pregnancy, although I was over 40. So I'd gone through the 12-week bit where you think that's where you're going to have worries, that's where you're going to see age-related abnormalities, and that had all gone brilliantly. They were really happy with the way the pregnancy was going. They were happy for me to go to the maternity-led unit to give birth again, so, you know, perfectly healthy. Went along to the 20-week scan. Actually, my husband almost didn't come because we were that relaxed about how things were going, but he did, thank goodness. And I lay there and they put the gel on and there was a big pause and you think, crikey, what, you know, is they're hoping they're just finding what's happening. And then he said the words I won't ever forget, which are, something's not right. And you just freeze, actually, you freeze. And you wait and you wait and you wait and they say, yeah, something's not right. There's a problem with the spine, there's a problem with the brain. But what he can't do is diagnose what's happened. Because he's just looking at the baby's picture. So, you know, we're frozen, we're sort of trying to hold back the tears, but hoping for the best. But so when you go for these scans where I live, it's at a maternity-led unit locally to me. So what they did was make an appointment at the main hospital. We went over very quickly, so that was amazing. And, you know, panicking along the way to wonder what's going to happen.
This same day?
Same day, within, you know, an hour and a half or whatever. And then you meet the consultant and you know something's going to go horribly wrong because they met you with the bereavement midwife and they were so lovely, but you're just waiting for them to tell you what is what. And we didn't know she was a little girl at that stage. You know, we were a sort of family that didn't find out. So we were waiting for that surprise. And that is relevant to what I come to a bit later. So they diagnosed very, very, very severe spina-bifida in our baby. She was already very, very badly brain damaged. But the tragedy for me there was I'd already felt her kicking for quite a number of weeks. So for me, she was just a very healthy little girl. So it was very difficult to compute what was going on there. And then they stayed with us for an awfully long time. And you sort of wait for them to tell you what happens next. And I just assumed that I would be going under a general anaesthetic and, in inverted commas, it would be taken care of. And my worst fear that I've had, it's bizarre that it's happened to me, was that I would have to go through childbirth, would not have a baby at the end of it. So when I was told that that's what they expected to do, that was the worst bit for me. I think there's lots of worse bits. And then they're not allowed to tell you that you're going to terminate the pregnancy, but it was the shake of the head. You know, there's nothing they can do. And so you have to sign a form that consents to infanticide. That's the word they use. And we went in the next day to have the injection, which would put potassium into my baby's heart, and she would die. And that is the hardest thing that anybody would do. It's completely counterintuitive to what a mum or a parent is expected to do. You know, the team there couldn't have made it any more bearable because they really were very kind to us. But there's no getting away from it. You have to go through that, and the procedure takes about 10 or 15 minutes. And I was so frightened because it's just completely counterintuitive. So that was on the Friday, and then you have to wait 48 hours before you can deliver. It took a longer time to deliver this baby than my first pregnancy.
8.5 hours.
Yeah,
you were in labour.
Yes, and then finally my waters broke, and she delivered very quickly after that. But the hard thing was how differently my husband and I dealt with this, because I think for men sometimes, certainly by the 20-week scan, often it can just be a pregnancy. Whereas if you're carrying the baby, it's a baby. And that's not a criticism at all. I think it's just the way things are often processed. And he just, couldn't face seeing her, actually, which was fine because, everybody has to cope with it in their own way. So when she delivered, he went out and went for a walk and rang family and that sort of thing. And there was a new midwife that had just come on, and she was amazing. Her name was Kat. And she handed me my baby, and I spoke to her for a little bit, and I gave her a kiss. And still didn't know she was a girl, actually. And then I said goodbye. And I'll never forget the midwife who she just said, is it okay if I take your baby outside to look at the stars? Which made her feel like a real person, actually. So when we talk about the NHS staff, that is the kindness that we're dealing with. And I'll never forget it. Sorry. And then...
Take time.
Yeah, and then we went home. And the tragedy of our story was the next day was my husband's birthday. So it was we were just desperate to get it all done and dusted before his day, so that in years to come, that remained his day, and that previous weekend remained Lily's weekend. And then it was after that I was told she was a little girl, and we named her, and it all became very real. And the reason why I think the difference between how my husband saw this and how I see it is relevant is because the advice I give to anybody who has gone through losing a baby, either at 20 weeks delivering or later, is that parents will they'll grieve in very different ways. And the stat that I heard at the beginning was that 50% of relationships will break up because of an experience like this. And so the advice I give is lean on outside of the family, because the person that you expect to lean on might not be there for you, and it's not their fault. So, yeah.
How do you mark her memory?
Whenever I can, actually, usually alone, usually by myself. So we don't mark her anniversary as such. What I do is I have little mementos around the house, little angels, sort of little angel ornaments or baubles on the tree or something like that I know are Lily's. And I have a memory box, another thing that most hospitals do well now, which is where they give you lots of memories of your baby. So you can, you have a little memento where you took half and they took half, and photographs, little keepsakes. And I keep it hidden. And then when I want to think about her, I'll look at it and I'll remember that day. A bit like now, actually. It's been a while since I've had tears. And I have to say to anybody who has gone through this or is going through this, it feels like that pain will never go away. But it gets much, much easier. And you find actually you go for days without, not without thinking about them, but without it owning you.
You've said more needs to be done to support bereaved families who have lost babies. What would you like to see done?
Well, when I joined the all-party group for baby loss as a brand new MP, the reason I went was because we were looked after so well in the hospital. But where, and this is no fault of theirs, where there was lacking afterwards was the follow-up counselling. We relied on the charities. I was given some counselling through my work. But my husband was never ever offered. I think he was offered, but he was never able. It was never taken up. He was never, given a date where he could go in and talk about what had happened with any of the bereavement counsellors at the hospital. And I think it was a resource thing. So I didn't want the men to be forgotten in this. Everybody always asks how mum is getting on, and they there's still a feeling that dad should be there to support mum. And it was my very strong feeling that actually both parents needed to be supported equally. And that was the reason I went along to that first meeting. It was the most busy all-party group meeting I'd been to. I mean, a lot of them have, these are the cross-party groups in Parliament.
Yes.
A lot of them you just get, one or two MPs who are desperately trying to do something. This had, over 50 people sitting in the room, not all parliamentarians, people from the sector, bereaved parents. And they talked about the National Care Bereavement Pathway, which is what we had obviously experienced very successfully in Cornwall. But it's not in every trust. It's not mandated to be in every trust. So what I would like to do is mandate that for every trust. And I'd like to see every trust coming forward to say that they now have that in place, so that all parents get cared for in the same way that we did. But also I'd like to add to that to make sure that all parents get those follow-up counselling sessions together or separately, probably more successfully separately, so that they can grieve in their own ways and still be there to support each other when the time is right. So that's number one. And number two, we just need to have more staff in the maternity area, so that and more specialised staff in the maternity area, so that when things do go wrong, in every trust, parents are listened to and their wishes are carried out.
How long did you have counselling for?
I had 6 weeks. So I was a Cornwall counsellor, and it was through there that I was able to access that counselling. And it was just a kind lady who works at Cornwall Council and said, "You do know you're entitled to do this." Normally they wait about 3 months after a bereavement before they start, but actually I had mine quite early. And you go through all sorts of emotions. You're 1 week you're just in shock. Another week you can be disbelief. You know, how has it happened? Anger. I raged at the world a lot in my car by myself. And I think, it's the normal grieving process. I think when you lose a baby, though, there's an extra, and the only word I can use for it is primal, where you just need to be pregnant and have your baby with you. And I used to try and joke with people, use the analogy of when penguins steal other eggs because they've lost their baby. It is that feeling. It's just a primal feeling that you have no control over, that you're 1 minute you were pregnant and now you're not. There's no baby there. Yeah.
Final question. The government has this target to halve the rate of stillbirths and neonatal deaths by 2025. It's not very long away.
Yeah.
Do they need to do more? Do they need to step it up? What's the most important part of that ambition? We had an inquiry, I think last year, where we were about halfway through that, and they were on track, actually, which was great news. But it's staffing is all I can say in the maternity sector. It's about it's what we hear in the NHS all the time. It's about retention. It's about looking after your staff. It's a vocation to be a midwife. It's certainly a vocation to be a bereavement midwife. It's one of the hardest jobs that people can do, and very special people do it. So we need to give them all the support we can. The other shocking thing that I have found while doing this role is that if you're Black or from an ethnic minority, you are far more likely to lose your baby and actually potentially die in childbirth. That's something that's come out of this. And one of the things we can use to counter that is the continuity of carer. So the same midwife or couple of midwives throughout your entire pregnancy. It also helps if you're living in social deprivation, if there's worries of lifestyle issues, domestic violence at home, coercion, that sort of thing. If you have the same midwife, the amount of difference that can make to the baby and the mum's outcomes is phenomenal. So I'm a huge advocate for trying to make sure that every mum has a continuity of carer in their pregnancy. It's a huge privilege to meet you, to listen to you, for you to be so open about the trauma that you've been through, for you to talk about the solutions that you're campaigning for. We'll go and get a tissue, both of us now, I think. Thank you, Cherilyn Mackrory. Thank you so much.
Thank you.